2025 has started with a bang. We got all sorts of stuff happening south of the border, tariffs and this and that, and Canada's going to become the 51st state, and a Liberal leadership run, and new names are getting thrown into the hat. Rates, unemployment, all sorts of stuff happening. All this and more with a good friend and mortgage broker, Dion Beg, right after this. Here we are, my friends, the start of our new year, and the news just keeps rolling in. We're here with our favorite mortgage broker and all of the land, Mr. Dion Beg. How you doing, my man?
Well, man, you and I took a holiday, but the news didn't take a holiday, and drama and, it's like watching a soap opera. Some of the stuff that you see on television nowadays with, friendly neighbors threatening to take over other countries, and and leaders resigning and deputy leaders resigning, leading to other leaders resigning. It's been an interesting period of time.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. You nailed it. It's kind of like, okay, we're gonna get into a whole bunch of stuff here because it's kind of like the internet has given us a platter, a smorgasbord, a buffet of all sorts of stuff, and I think Mark Carney said it best, and we're going to jump into Mark Carney in a little bit here. He was on Jon Stewart the other day, if anyone's seen any of those highlights. And we're going to dive deeper on it. Don't worry, my friends. My favorite line to him, to Jon Stewart, about Canada joining the U.S., no, it's not you, it's me. It was pretty funny. All sorts of stuff, Dion, from the finance minister in Canada to stepping down to...
I think we should start there, actually.
Okay, let's do it. So the finance minister steps down.
This is the middle of December sometime, I think it was. She resigns on a Friday, and she was scheduled to give the budget speech on the following Monday. And she resigned because Trudeau had said to her, well, after you give the budget speech, I'm going to reposition you into a different role, which basically was a demotion from what it sounded like. And she said, well, you want me to deliver all this terrible economic news to Canada and then you're going to demote me? I don't think so. And she said, thank you very much. I'm out of here. I'm sure, again, this seems like old news, but we should cover it. In her letter of resignation, she went out of her way to put some pretty strong language in there, in particular, saying something along the lines, she used this word, she used gimmicks. She said, I do not approve of some of the gimmicks that have been put forward. And you and I know what those gimmicks are, Gary. They were the 2-month HST holiday, right? And the $250 per Canadian adult bonus, right? Which is going to cost the economy billions of dollars. And when those came out, you, me, and everybody said, well, these are ridiculous. And it's clear that even inside his own cabinet, people thought that these things were ridiculous. And so, she said, I'm not gonna fall on this grenade, which is the budget, where we're basically saying we blew it by another 50%. It was supposed to be minus 40 billion. It was in fact minus 60 billion in the deficit. And so she wouldn't do it. I think he went through 4 or 5 other people to present the budget who said, no, we're not doing it either. Right? And then, well, we all know what happened then. So the second in command's out of there, and then soon after we get Mr. Trudeau himself.
Yeah, it's kind of like a roller coaster of events, or a domino of events, if you will. And then you have, going to the south of the border, which has created a whole slew of new news events. And we don't need to remind everybody what Donald Trump has been saying. We all know. And let's start with the tariffs, because the tariffs, that was a big part of his campaign, if we all remember. And now he's really stepping up to threaten, I think is the right word, and impose tariffs of, Canadian goods, Mexican goods, China goods, all sorts of stuff. And it's really thrown everyone into a frenzy, if you will. And I don't know if you recall this, but I was listening to Trudeau talk about tariffs a week or two ago, and of course, this was this would have been about 6-ish years ago in Trump's first term. He imposed the same thing. And do you know what the Canadian government did at that point?
I
Do you
can't remember.
recall? Okay. And again, this is, it's in our past and we forget. Trump, they started imposing some of the same style of tariffs, not across the board, but same style. I think it was on the lumber specifically. And the Canadian government at that time chose very specific brands, U.S. manufacturing brands that were coming into Canada and tariffed them. Like,
Mm,
I'm not going to remember all of them. The one I do remember is Harley Davidson.
right.
So
Okay.
every motorcycle or part that came into Canada had an extra tariff put on it, and the reasoning behind some of those specific targeted tariffs were those were huge Trump supporters, friends, and colleagues of him. And I found it very interesting.
Right.
And and in fact, they've talked about doing some of the same thing again, like with, funny enough, with oranges coming out of Florida.
Okay. Because that's where his Mar-a-Lago is, and a whole bunch of his voters are, and I get it. Yeah. So tactically targeting those which he has a personal consequence in that, if his friends who run these companies are getting impacted, they're going to lean on him and say, "Hey, this is hurting us," right? So yeah, that was smart, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it's definitely created, like we said, a bit of a frenzy, if you will, um, with the potential. He calls it the economic pressure, um, and he's using some other terminology as well. But you know, I had a colleague post a video, and I tend to agree. During a negotiation, you kind of throw everything at the wall. Sometimes some negotiation tactics, you throw everything at the wall, and we think the issue's here, but really the issue's like way over here.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's like negotiating on a purchase price, for
Yeah,
example, right?
yeah,
If your target sale price is 800, you might offer it to the market at 850 and land at 800. And so, yeah, a lot of people are saying that Trump, well, he's a politician and a businessman, and so he might be just again, yeah, throwing out this hyperbole and then hoping that some of it sticks. And when we maybe settle on a 5% tariff, everybody sees that as a win, when in fact it's still a loss, right? But it depends on what you're benchmarking it against. So yeah, I don't know if 25% across the board is going to happen. If I had to bet, I would say probably not.
yeah, yeah. Probably not. And I'd love to get your input or insight on, obviously we've learned over the last week or two that Trudeau is stepping down, well, has stepped down as the Liberal leader or the candidate for that. And we know that of all things said and done, we're going to see an election. The Liberal Party needs a new leader, and some people are coming to the forefront. And one in particular, just really yesterday, or Jan 14th, thereabouts, there was a new name kind of thrown into the hat that people are kind of raising their eyebrows about because we hadn't thought about this gentleman before. Talk to us about Mark Carney.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I remember the name from when I first moved to Canada, because I moved to Canada in 2009. And at that time, we were in the middle of this financial crisis. And he was one of the people in the government at the time who was, I believe, dealing with how to manage the GFC and how Canadian banks were reacting to it. And also, what I remember in the years that followed was that Canada came out of the GFC financially better off than many of the other sort of G7 or Western civilized countries. And I think some of that had to do with his advice, input, and leadership at the time. I think also what's interesting is he's currently not a sitting member of parliament in any way. And if we translate this to what happened in the United States, Gary, where a lot of people say that the reason that Kamala Harris was unsuccessful in her bid for presidency is because she didn't do enough to distance herself from the decisions of the Biden administration, and that she kind of didn't, kind of stood by those decisions. Carney doesn't have to, because he wasn't part of the system. when all of these decisions with Trudeau were made. And so if we look at, say, the alternative, Chrystia Freeland, who is potentially another name in the hat there, she, as much as her resignation letter did say that, she was disappointed with some of the decisions that were made, the question is, can the Canadian public look past the fact that she did stand beside Trudeau for, nearly how many, I don't know, 9 years or whatever it was, with many of the decisions that he made at the time. So that may, the freshness of Carney, even though he's probably one of the older people who've been around the longest, he's not in the Liberal Party in the same way that Freeland is. He may be fresher in the eyes of the Canadian public.
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of great points there, and I just looked up some of his bio here, and he's young, and at one part he's 59 years old. So in a case, he's still a young man, but compared to our southern compadre,
If you're not 80, don't run.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we often talk about the pedigree or the work experience of someone that we're going to be hiring, whether it's in our own organization or someone we're going to elect. And he was the governor of the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013. So through those turbulent years that you just described, of which he created world recognition for his name and his leadership through that turmoil. Then became, for the last several years, the governor of the Bank of England. So even a much bigger portfolio, we'll call it, to manage and to lead. And I think of all the names that could be the potential Liberal leader or even Pierre Poilievre, the next leader of Canada, I think Mark Carney would perhaps have the more world. What's the word I'm looking for? Recognition. Yeah, experience. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. It'll be really, really interesting. He might provide that stable support that Liberal Party's been looking for the last several years, if you will. It'll be an interesting time over the next, approximately 6-7 months as we lead up into an election.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and we only kind of get fed what the algorithm feeds us. But I'll say that from everything that I've been seeing and reading, it's almost like a full drawn conclusion that the Conservatives are going to be the new party to lead Canada in the next 4 years. That's what it seems like at this time. But stranger things have happened. People think that people thought that Kamala was going to win that election by a landslide, and as it turns out, it went the other way. So, right now everybody thinks it's the Conservatives, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, and I'll go out on a limb here. Often on platforms like this, I typically don't share my own personal political views, but I'll tell people today that I have typically voted conservative for the Conservative Party, but I'm also open-minded that if there's a better leader, I'm all ears. Quite frankly. So to have someone and to learn what Mark Carney can do. Again, I don't often, he doesn't have that political background or those political that pedigree or that experience. But hey, if there's a better leader, I think we need to be open-minded, as opposed to I'm always voting this up because of my parents, my grandparents, and everybody else voted this, and this. I think we need to be somewhat open-minded, and that's what makes Canada great.
Working in mortgages, which is credit, and we discussed this. Credit is all about the idea that I'll take on debt today because I believe that it's going to put me in a better position tomorrow. And I think for the last couple of years, many interest rates were high, sure, but also the leadership in the government didn't lend people the belief that in the future things would in fact be significantly better than they are today. And I think what Canadians are looking for in political leadership is the idea that this person is going to make the country lead to a situation in the country where my children and grandchildren will be better off than I am. And I can tell you that feeling has been absent in Canada for probably the last 5 years. So whoever wins this election is going to be the one who can speak to that problem, I think.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So Moving on, there's a few things that perhaps we should kind of finish up with, and one of which is, and we're going to get to rates and amortizations. Let's end with that, Dion. But before we get to that, let's talk about we're talking about the Canadian government and the political scene and that sort of thing. Let's talk about unemployment and steer us through that conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, I went to school for a university for international business and marketing, and economics 101 is the underlying first course that you take, and it talks about the fact that in our economy there are big levers that the government watches, or big economic indicators that they watch, and then big levers that they can pull to create change in those things, and one of those is unemployment. And again, what I remember from Economics 101 back at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia, is that ideally unemployment should hover somewhere around 5%. We're never going to get to zero. We're never going to have full employment, but 5% is a manageable number. So with that in mind, let's take a look, Gary, at that chart for Ontario.
Yeah, here we are here. So this is Ontario that Dion sent to me. And this is a link off of Y charts that everyone can look up. Right now, we have it hovering over the 1 year outlook, and you can see Dion.
Can you zoom in a couple of zooms there? Gary?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see if we can do that. Let's just see here. Give me a second.
There you go. Yeah.
How's that help out?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So you can see that big 7.5 number. That's where we are at the end of 2024. And we started the year, in a sense, at 6.2. So walk me through this, and then we can jump out and zoom out and look at the 3 and 5 year, of course.
Yeah, because so unemployment is a factor of, the productivity of a business. And if a business is doing well, then they're going to hire more people and they're going to grow. And a business doing well comes down to GDP growth, overall production and consumption in society. And what's clear over the last couple of years is people haven't been spending money because effectively their household income has been robbed from them in the form of shelter costs, be it higher rents or higher mortgage payments. So when that happens, people have less money to spend. Therefore, businesses aren't making the revenue that they would hope that they would make. And instead of growing, they're contracting. They're actually laying people off because they're not selling the volume of goods or services that they would normally hope to. And so, as I said earlier, 5% is maybe that safe number, manageable number that most central bankers are looking for. But we're at 7.5% in Ontario, which is 50% higher than what, again, the textbooks would tell you is the safe zone. And with that in mind, in terms of what is the next possible move for the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem and his crew, again, it's another rate drop, right? And we have another Bank of Canada meeting scheduled for the 29th of Jan. And again, everybody is mostly calling for at least a 0.25% drop this month.
And I think, first of all, I just want to remind everybody, this is the Ontario one. So if you're looking at this and you're assuming this is Canada, again, this is the Ontario unemployment.
Just a reminder, Toronto is the center of the universe. So that's why God is using his chart.
That's excellent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you have it. Why else wouldn't it be? Is I think that's what Donald Trump needs to realize. First off, good stuff. So, if there's less money being spent, which means perhaps there's less sales and that type of thing, residential, home sales or house sales. What does that do to the economy in a sense, Dion?
Well, the stats say that about 1 in 5 jobs are connected to construction in Canada. And that goes from the guy who works on the construction site to the guy who drives the cement truck to the rocks that go to the actual production of that same cement. So if we're talking about 20% of the economy tied to construction, then again, that's a huge dip in terms of unemployment there. And the background here, guys, is when interest rates hit 6 and 7%, a bunch of developers who had billions of dollars worth of construction ready to start said, no, we're not going to start, because with interest rates that high, and end users not being able to afford the price of that final product, they said, well, we can't go ahead and build this stuff. And so for the last 2 years, there's been a massive slowdown in construction.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen that. And of course, we've seen a reduction in the number of transactions per year, which obviously we've talked in the past has a direct effect on your local economies, regardless of the Canadian economy. When it comes to things like this, we really look at that local economy. And when we see the number of sales drop, 10, 20% and more, 30%, that has a huge dramatic effect on that local economy and the like. Okay. Mortgage broker. That is your profession. Let's talk about what's going on in that world with some renewals and amortizations and rates and that type of thing.
Yeah, so I can tell you that this year in particular, and I'm just one team in this big ecosystem that is the mortgage world, but I can tell you that our volume is up about more than 50% year over year for the last couple of years for January. And remember, these last couple of Januaries have been environments in which rates have been continuously going up. Okay, so this is the first year we're starting the year where we're in an environment where the last moves from the Bank of Canada were down. Okay, so when I measure this January to the previous Januaries, our volume is already up. Our level of inquiry is up. And good news, and a lot of our business the last couple of years has been sort of managing refinances. But what I can say this year is we're already seeing a surprising uptick in purchase volume, meaning that a lot of these people who've been waiting to purchase feel like this is the year that they're confident enough to buy. And I can tell you that we've done several high ratio purchases this year where the buyers have utilized the new 30-year amortization, which results in that lower payment, which results in a much more affordable scenario for them. So I think that a couple of these changes, in particular the 30-year amortization for first-time home buyers, is going to be that catalyst that unlocks some of the transactions that have been waiting to happen. So these guys are going to buy their first home. The people who sell that home are going to buy their second home, and so on and so on. And so I feel a lot more positive about the prospects of transaction volume this year than in previous years. And when talking with colleagues, lenders, they're also predicting somewhere between 15 to 25% uplift in mortgage volume transaction this year. Some of that has to do with, renewals, right, which translate back to a lot of people who bought back in the year 2020, coming to their 5-year maturity on those mortgages this year. But also these purchases where affordability has somewhat returned to the market, which has been absent in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And from our perspective as realtors, I don't feel like we're going to see a run up in prices or anything like that. I think and you just use it, that affordability is now starting to creep back into the market, which is what everybody in a sense has been waiting for. And I think everyone's going to be very what's the word I'm looking for? Very aware of that. We might, we'll have some outliers where all of a sudden we see a property skyrocket and that type of thing. But I think for the basis of your local markets, it'll be, I don't think we're going to see the big year over year increases in prices. Everyone's going to be very, very aware of affordability and keeping it from that perspective. But we will see sales increase, which is a good thing. Help set the expectations for everybody with buyers, sellers, realtors, mortgage brokers, and your colleagues. I know it's still very early in the new year, but are we starting to see approvals or remarks coming back from the lenders on, yes, this looks like a great borrower, we can get them this product, and what's that timing look like? Are we still looking at that 7 to 14 days approval kind of type thing?
So I wish that I got purchase agreements with 14 days. Give me 14 days to get finance approved, but that never happens, Gary. So in Canada, what is standard is when you sign a purchase agreement, If you do put in a condition of finance, that standard period of time is 5 business days, meaning if you sign up for a purchase over the weekend, you have until that following Friday afternoon to get your financing in place. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've had many of these come through. Generally speaking, if you are looking to purchase, what you want to do before you go look at any property is talk to a mortgage broker and get pre-approved. Because, guys, you've got to get through the minutia that is the paperwork, with the pay stubs and other stuff that will allow us to get you, some numbers. So we get your mortgage file 90% complete before you go looking at any property. Because and actually this happened last night. We had a client who was told by a different lender that they were ready to go to purchase a property, and their realtor called me last night saying, "Hey, Dion, their lender has not followed through. They're not going to get approved." And now this morning, like last night, I had to tell these guys to go and get me every piece of paper under the sun in the middle of negotiating, their purchase. That's the worst thing for them, for us, for the lender. Everybody hates that scenario. So get pre-approved. Once you are pre-approved, you bring me a purchase agreement tomorrow. We'll likely get you a full approval, a mortgage commitment within 2 to 3 days of that actually being signed up. So well within that 5-day window of time. Preparedness. I can't stress that enough. You've got to get prepared.
Be prepared. There you have it, my friends. Remind us how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, kangamortgage.ca or Instagram at the Dion Beg.
There you have it. That is the Dion Beg. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next episode. Goodbye for now.